The space station hung in the void like a giant metal flower. Its silver petals stretched out in all directions, each one designed to house different alien species. Harmony Point was the most neutral place in the galaxy, built specifically for meetings between worlds that might otherwise shoot at each other. Today, it buzzed with activity as ships from dozens of planets docked at its many ports. Jake Morrison stood at the observation window of Docking Bay 12, watching the latest arrivals. His weathered face showed no emotion as he studied each vessel. At 53 years old, he had seen enough alien technology to know that Earth's ships looked pathetic by comparison. The human transport that had brought him here was little more than a metal box with engines attached. It sat quietly in its assigned space, dwarfed by the sleek vessels around it. Jake wore a simple black suit that looked plain next to the elaborate uniforms and ceremonial robes of other diplomats. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his tired blue eyes missed nothing. He had been Earth's ambassador for 8 years, and every meeting felt like swimming upstream against a current of condescension and dismissal. The Galactic Trade Council met once every standard year to discuss commerce, territorial disputes, and resource allocation. Earth had been invited to these meetings for only 3 years, ever since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel. Most species viewed humans as newcomers who had barely crawled out of their gravity well. They were not entirely wrong. Commotion near the main entrance caught Jake's attention. The massive doors slid open with a hiss, and a procession of tall, graceful beings glided into the station's central hub. The Zephyrians had arrived. Their crystalline ships outside were works of art, all flowing curves and transparent sections that seemed to bend light itself. The delegation moved with the fluid grace of dancers, their blue skin shimmering under the station's light's dot. At the front of the group walked a young male, who could only be Crown Prince Kelther. Jake had studied the prince's file extensively. 19 years old by Zephyrian standards, though that translated to roughly 30 human years. Golden eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. Features that were sharp and elegant in the way that only royalty could achieve. The prince wore robes that shifted color as he moved, and a crown of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue energy. The Zephyrian Empire controlled nearly a quarter of known space. Their technology was so advanced that some species worshipped them as gods. They had mastered genetic engineering, energy manipulation, and time dilation. A single Zephyrian battleship could destroy an entire planet without breaking formation. They rarely bothered with trade negotiations, because most species simply gave them whatever they wanted in exchange for protection. Jake turned away from the window and made his way to the main assembly hall. The circular chamber was enormous, with seating arranged in tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling. Each species had been assigned sections based on their environmental needs. The aquatic Krillians sat in water-filled tanks, while the rock-like Thronok occupied reinforced platforms, designed to handle their massive weight. Humans had been given a small section near the back, appropriate for their minor status in galactic affairs. The opening ceremony began with the traditional greeting from Station Commander Vexal, an insectoid being whose mandibles clicked rhythmically as he spoke. Representatives from major powers gave brief speeches about cooperation and mutual benefit. Jake listened politely while reviewing trade proposals on his datapad. Earth needed better access to rare minerals and medical technology. They had little to offer in return except raw materials and cultural artifacts that most species found quaint at best. During a break in the formal presentations, Jake moved to a side table to organize his notes. The human delegation was small. Just himself, trade specialist Linda Brooks, and security officer Captain Sam Torres. They looked insignificant compared to the massive entourages that accompanied other major powers. The sound of approaching footsteps made Jake look up. Prince Kelthair was walking toward him, followed by 6 members of his royal guard. The young alien's golden eyes held an expression of amused superiority that Jake had seen many times before. Conversations around the hall began to quiet as other delegates noticed what was happening. The prince stopped directly in front of Jake's table and spoke in a voice that carried clearly across the chamber. His words were delivered in perfect standard galactic, with the precise pronunciation that marked him as highly educated. "So this is humanity's great representative," he said, looking Jake up and down with obvious disappointment. "I must say, I expected something more impressive from a species that claims to deserve a seat at this table." Jake continued organizing his papers without looking up. He had learned long ago that rising to such bait only made things worse. The prince seemed encouraged by this lack of response and continued his verbal assault with growing confidence. "Your species has existed for what? A few 100,000 years? And in all that time, you have managed to spread to exactly 1 star system. The Zephyrian Empire was exploring distant galaxies when your ancestors were still discovering fire." The prince gestured dismissively at Jake's simple clothing. "You dress like merchants, speak like children, and think like primitives. Your technology is barely functional. Your lifespans are laughably short, and your understanding of the universe is so limited that you still believe in concepts like linear time." Other delegates had stopped their conversations entirely now. Some looked uncomfortable with the public humiliation, while others seemed relieved that humanity was the target instead of their own species. Jake finished arranging his papers and closed his datapad with a soft click. He stood slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. The prince smiled triumphantly, believing he had successfully cowed the human representative. "Perhaps Earth should reconsider whether it truly belongs among civilized species," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "After all, there is a vast difference between those who were born to rule the stars and those who barely deserve to glimpse them." Jake looked directly into the prince's golden eyes for a moment. His expression remained completely neutral, showing neither anger nor embarrassment. Then he nodded politely, picked up his datapad, and walked quietly toward the exit. He did not run, did not hurry, and did not look back. His footsteps echoed softly in the sudden silence of the great hall. Prince Kelthair laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing. "And there goes humanity's mighty diplomat," he announced to the assembly, retreating without even attempting to defend his species. How perfectly predictable. The prince's entourage joined in his laughter, and gradually, other species began to resume their conversations. But Jake Morrison was not retreating. He was just getting started. News of the incident spread through Harmony Point faster than a plasma fire. Within an hour, every delegate on the station knew that the human ambassador had been publicly humiliated by Prince Kelthair. The story grew with each telling, becoming more dramatic and more damaging to Earth's already fragile reputation. By evening, most species assumed that humanity would withdraw from the negotiations entirely. In the diplomatic quarters, conversations buzzed with speculation. The Velinari whispered among themselves through their telepathic networks, expressing pity for the embarrassed humans. The Krillian delegation sent formal condolences through their water-filled communication tubes. Even the proud Thronic generals shook their massive stone heads in sympathy, understanding what it meant to be publicly shamed by a superior force. The Zephyrians, meanwhile, pressed their advantage. Prince Kelthair called an emergency session to discuss new trade agreements that heavily favored his empire. With humanity effectively silenced, other species found themselves unable to oppose the increasingly aggressive terms. The prince's earlier display had reminded everyone exactly who held the real power in galactic politics, but Jake Morrison did not retreat to his quarters as expected. Instead, he began what appeared to be a casual walking tour of the station. Still wearing his simple black suit, he strolled through the various sections with the unhurried pace of a tourist. To most observers, he seemed to be killing time before an inevitable departure. Jake's first stop was the Krillian aquatic habitat, a massive water-filled dome that allowed the dolphin-like beings to swim freely while conducting business. Ambassador. Reef singer Nala approached the viewing window with graceful movements, her silver skin rippling in the artificial currents. Through the translation device, her voice carried the musical quality that made Krillian speech so distinctive. "Human Jake," she sang, using the formal address structure of her people. "This one expresses sorrow for the harsh words spoken against your kind. The young prince knows little of respect or wisdom." Jake smiled gently and activated his own translator. When he spoke, it was not in standard galactic, but in fluent Krillian, complete with the complex tonal variations that most species found impossible to master. "Honored reef singer, your kindness flows like deep ocean currents. But tell me, how fare the coral farms of Aquatica Prime?" The last reports spoke of bleaching in the northern reefs. Nala's large eyes widened in surprise. Few non-Krillians knew about Aquatica Prime, let alone the ongoing ecological crisis that threatened there. Food supply. Jake not only knew about it, but understood the complex relationship between water temperature, mineral content, and coral health. For the next 30 minutes, they discussed advanced aquaculture techniques and sustainable farming methods. Jake suggested several approaches that Nala had never considered, drawing from Earth's own experience with ocean conservation. When their conversation ended, Nala watched Jake leave with a completely different expression. This human understood her people's struggles better than many Krillians did. How was that possible? Jake's next destination was the high-gravity Thronok section, where the massive rock-like beings conducted their affairs under crushing atmospheric pressure. The environmental suits required for human survival were bulky and uncomfortable, but Jake moved through them with practiced ease. He found General Stone Crusher Ben reviewing tactical displays near the Military Coordination Center. The Thronok turned his great boulder of a head toward the approaching human. Each of his movements created small tremors in the reinforced floor. His voice rumbled like an avalanche when he spoke. "Human diplomat Jake Morrison, you show courage walking here." After facing shame in the Great Hall, many would hide in their quarters. Jake activated his suit's external speakers and replied in Thronok Battlecant, the formal military language that required precise timing and emphasis to convey proper respect. "Honored Stone Crusher, shame exists only when one cares more for appearance than truth. Your wisdom in the siege of Fortress World Granite still echoes through military academies across the galaxy." Ben's entire massive form went still. The siege of Granite had occurred over 2 centuries ago, and few beings outside the Thronok military hierarchy knew the tactical details. Yet this human was referencing specific strategies that Ben himself had developed as a young officer. More than that, Jake began discussing supply line management and logistics, coordination with a depth of understanding that impressed even the veteran general. They talked for nearly an hour about military history, defensive strategies, and the challenges of coordinating multi-species forces. Jake demonstrated knowledge of battles, weapon systems, and tactical doctrines from dozens of different civilizations. When he finally left, General Ben stood in thoughtful silence, his rocky features arranged in what passed for amazement among his kind. The pattern continued throughout the station. In the ethereal chambers of the Valinari, Jake engaged in philosophical discussions with Whispermind Lisa about consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the nature of existence. He spoke there, language of pure thought, communicating concepts through mental imagery that most physical beings could never master. The telepathic aliens found themselves challenged and intrigued by perspectives they had never encountered, With the energy-based luminar delegation, Jake discussed stellar engineering and fusion technology. With the hive-minded Swarm Collective, he explored social organization and resource distribution. Each conversation revealed deeper layers of knowledge and understanding that seemed impossible for a representative of such a young species. Word began to spread through different channels. Now, not gossip about humiliation, but quiet observations about the human ambassador's unexpected capabilities. Delegates who had dismissed Earth as primitive found themselves reconsidering their assumptions. The conversations were always respectful, always insightful, and always demonstrated that Jake Morrison knew far more about galactic affairs than anyone had imagined. Captain Sam Torres watched his ambassador's progress from a distance, maintaining the discreet security presence that was standard for all diplomatic missions. Sam had worked with Jake for 3 years and had seen this pattern before, though never on such a scale. The ambassador was methodically building relationships and demonstrating competence in a way that made the prince's earlier arrogance look increasingly foolish. Trade specialist Linda Brooks continued working on Earth's official proposals, but she noticed that other delegations were beginning to approach her with questions. Not demands or dismissals, but genuine inquiries about human capabilities and interests. Species that had ignored Earth entirely were suddenly interested in what humanity might bring to potential partnerships. That by the end of the day, the atmosphere on Harmony Point had subtly shifted. The prince's triumph was beginning to feel hollow as more delegates realized they had underestimated the quiet human who had walked away from confrontation. Jake Morrison had not defended himself with words or demonstrations of power. Instead, he had simply revealed through patient conversation that humanity understood the galaxy far better than anyone had believed possible. As station lights dimmed to simulate night cycles for the various species, Jake finally returned to his quarters. He had spoken with representatives from 18 different civilizations, each conversation conducted in their native language and cultural context. He had offered solutions to problems, shared insights about challenges, and demonstrated a depth of knowledge that spanned centuries of galactic history. The young prince had mocked humanity for being primitive and ignorant. But Jake Morrison's quiet tour of the station had begun to reveal a very different truth. The question now was whether anyone would be wise enough to recognize what they had witnessed before it was too late to matter. The emergency alert pierced through Harmony Point's peaceful morning cycle like a scream. Red warning lights flashed in every corridor as the station's automated systems detected massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. In the central command center, Station Commander Vexol's mandibles clicked frantically as incoming data flooded his screens. The transmission that followed chilled every being on the station to their core. It came through on all frequencies, simultaneously, bypassing every security protocol with effortless ease. The voice was mechanically perfect, devoid of emotion or warmth, speaking in the precise tones that marked the hegemony of Zarthan. Biological entities of the Galactic Trade Council, the voice announced. You have been selected for technological integration into the Hegemony Collective. Surrender your primitive biological forms and accept superior mechanical enhancement, or face systematic termination. You have 1 standard day to comply. Resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your worlds. The transmission cut off, leaving behind a silence more terrifying than any scream. Through the observation windows, delegates could see them now, dark shapes emerging from hyperspace like metallic nightmares. The Hegemony fleet consisted of geometric vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each ship was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Like eggs, panic spread through the station faster than the morning's rumors had traveled. In the Zephyrian section, Prince Kelther stood frozen before the tactical displays, his golden eyes wide with disbelief. The Hegemony was a legend A cautionary tale told to civilizations that grew too proud of their technology. They were machine intelligences that had long ago discarded biological weakness in favor of mechanical perfection. No one was supposed to be able to stand against them. Emergency sessions convened in every major delegation's quarters. The Thronok generals activated war protocols that had not been used in centuries. The Krillian admirals ran probability calculations through their quantum computers. The Velinari reached out with their collective consciousness, seeking any psychic weakness in the approaching fleet. Every attempt at finding a solution led to the same conclusion. They were facing annihilation. In the main assembly hall, representatives from the galaxy's greatest powers gathered in desperate consultation. The Zephyrian military advisor, Admiral Kristolai Voron, presented the Empire's analysis with barely controlled fear in his voice. Our most advanced battleships cannot penetrate their defensive shields. Their weapons operate on principles that we barely understand. Even our temporal manipulation technology is useless against beings that exist outside normal spacetime. General Stonecrusher Ben's report was equally grim. The Thronok military maintains detailed records of the hegemony's previous campaigns. They have never been defeated. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They simply arrive, deliver their ultimatum, and then either assimilate or destroy everything in their path. As the hours passed, the situation grew more desperate. Long-range sensors showed the hegemony fleet moving into attack formation. Their weapons were charging, creating energy readings that dwarfed anything in the galactic database. Evacuation was impossible. The mechanical ships had positioned themselves to block every escape route. Prince Kelthar sat in stunned silence as his empire's greatest minds admitted defeat before the battle had even begun. The young royal's earlier confidence had evaporated completely. All his pride in Zephyrian superiority meant nothing when faced with an enemy that treated organic life as an obsolete curiosity. In the midst of this chaos, Jake Morrison moved through the station with the same unhurried pace he had maintained the day before. While other delegates argued and panicked, he made his way to the communication center with quiet determination. The technician on duty, a nervous Grellian named Clickspeak Dex, looked up as the human approached. "Ambassador Morrison," Dex chittered anxiously. "All outbound communications are being monitored by the hegemony. They will intercept any message we send." Jake nodded calmly. "I need a quantum-encrypted channel to Earth, specifically to Terran Defense Command. Priority clearance code Alpha 77. Dex's multifaceted eyes widened. Most species barely understood quantum encryption, let alone possessed the technology to implement it. And what was Terran Defense Command? Earth was supposed to have only basic military capabilities. But something in Jake's tone made the technician comply without further questions. The connection established faster than should have been possible. On the screen, a woman's face appeared, stern features marked by tactical implants that glowed softly at her temples. Her uniform was unfamiliar, but clearly military, and her eyes held the hard competence of someone who had seen real combat. "Ambassador Morrison," she said without preamble. "We've been monitoring the situation. Colonel Ryan Murphy is standing by with the fleet." "Helen," Jake replied, using her first name in a way that suggested long familiarity. "Initiate Protocol 7. Full. Defensive deployment. And Helen, it's time." Captain Helen Grant nodded once. "Understood, Jake. ETA is 4 hours. Try not to let them start the party without us." The transmission ended, leaving Dex staring at the human ambassador with a completely new expression. Around the communication center, other technicians had overheard enough to understand that something significant had just occurred. Jake Morrison was not just calling for help. He was coordinating with people who had been expecting this exact scenario. Word of the mysterious communication spread quickly through the station's rumor networks. Delegates who had spent the morning contemplating their doom suddenly found themselves wondering what Earth's ambassador knew that they did not. The questions multiplied when long-range sensors detected new hyperspace signatures approaching from the direction of Sol System. What emerged from hyperspace 4 hours later defied every assumption about human capabilities. The lead ship was a massive battleship that radiated lethal efficiency from every line of its design. Unlike the artistic curves of Zephyrian vessels or the brutal functionality of Throne Oak warships, the human fleet displayed a perfect balance of form and function that spoke of advanced engineering principles. The TDS Defiance led a formation of 12 heavy cruisers and 36 destroyer escorts. Each ship bore weapons that registered on sensors as completely unknown technology. Their hulls shimmered with energy fields that suggested defensive capabilities beyond anything in current galactic databases. Most shocking of all, the fleet moved with the precise coordination of a force that had trained together for years. Captain Helen Grant's voice came through the station's communication system with calm authority. Harmony Point Control, this is Captain Grant of the Terran Defense Service. We are assuming defensive coordination for this system. All civilian vessels maintain current positions. Military units prepare to receive tactical data packages. In the Zephyrian Command Center, Prince Kelther stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. The energy readings from the human ships rivaled the output of the hegemony fleet. Admiral, Voron ran analysis after analysis, each one confirming the impossible truth. Earth possessed military technology that matched or exceeded Zephyrian capabilities. How is this possible? The prince whispered, his voice barely audible. They are supposed to be primitive. They barely achieved faster-than-light travel 3 years ago. Admiral Voron's crystalline features reflected confusion and growing respect. Your Highness, these readings suggest that human military development has been proceeding along completely different principles than anything we have encountered. Their power generation systems alone represent advances that our scientists believed were centuries away. Similar conversations were occurring throughout the station as each species. Military experts struggled to understand what they were witnessing. The humans had not just arrived with a fleet. They had revealed capabilities that redefined the entire galactic power structure. Jake Morrison stood at the observation window, watching as the human fleet took defensive positions around Harmony Point. His expression remained calm, but there was something different in his eyes now. The patient diplomat was gone, replaced by someone who clearly understood exactly what was about to happen. The hegemony fleet detected the new arrivals and adjusted their formation accordingly. Their mechanical voices issued updated ultimatums. But for the first time in their long history of conquest, they faced an enemy that did not flee in terror. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether organic life would survive to see another day. The tactical briefing took place in Harmony Point's largest conference chamber, with representatives from every major military force crammed into a space designed for half their number. Captain Helen Grant stood at the center of the room, her tactical implants glowing as she processed data streams from dozens of sources simultaneously. The holographic display behind her showed the hegemony fleet in terrifying detail, their weapons charged and ready to begin planetary bombardment. Admiral Voron of the Zephyrians spoke first, his crystalline voice carrying the weight of millennia of military tradition. Captain Grant, while we appreciate Earth's willingness to assist, the hegemony possesses weapons that can destroy stars. Our combined fleets represent the greatest military power in known space, and our strategists calculate less than a 3% chance of survival. Helen's expression did not change as she replied, Admiral, your calculations are based on incomplete data. Before we proceed, there are some things you need to understand about humanity's role in galactic affairs. She gestured to Jake Morrison, who had remained silent near the back of the room. The ambassador stepped forward, and for the first time since arriving at Harmony Point, he looked like something other than a tired diplomat. His shoulders were straighter, his eyes sharper, and his entire demeanor radiated quiet authority. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "For the past 3 years, you have known Earth. As a newcomer to galactic civilization, this has been a carefully maintained fiction. Humanity has been monitoring galactic communications and activities for over 2 centuries. The silence that followed was absolute. General Stone Crusher Ben's massive form went completely still, while Whisper-Mind Lisa's telepathic emanations spiked with shock. Prince Kelther leaned forward in his chair, golden eyes wide with disbelief. Jake continued with the same calm tone he had used throughout the summit. "Our first deep space monitoring stations detected alien communications in 1847 by your calendar. Instead of announcing our presence, humanity chose to observe, learn, and prepare. We studied every species, analyzed every technology, and prepared for the day when we might be needed." Captain Helen Grant activated the holographic display, showing a timeline that stretched back centuries. During this period, human scientists reverse-engineered technology from debris fields, studied captured equipment from ancient battlegrounds, and developed countermeasures to every known weapon system. In the Galactic Database, our research facilities, led by teams like Dr. Patricia Ross's Quantum Mechanics Division and Dr. Kevin Lai's Energy Systems Laboratory, worked in absolute secrecy. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Reef singer Nala's melodic voice carried a note of awe as she spoke. "You have been watching us for 200 years, learning our weaknesses, studying our capabilities." Jake's expression softened slightly. "Not to exploit them, Ambassador, to protect you. Humanity realized early that the galaxy contained threats, far greater than any single species could handle. We positioned ourselves to be the shield that no one knew they needed." Helen brought up a new display showing a series of galactic maps marked with incident reports. The Veltar plague that threatened to wipe out 3 species in 2387. Human bioengineers developed the cure and distributed it through anonymous medical supply drops. The cosmic storm of Antares that disrupted shipping lanes for 6 months. Our physicists provided the shield technology that saved countless lives, delivered through intermediary species who believed they had developed it themselves. The revelations continued in a steady stream that rewrote galactic history. Wars prevented through strategic intelligence leaks. Genocide stopped by mysterious equipment failures in aggressor fleets. Natural disasters mitigated by anonymous. Humanitarian aid that always arrived precisely when needed. Each incident showed humanity's invisible hand guiding the galaxy away from catastrophe. Prince Kelther found his voice at last, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "The Zephyrian Empire has files on 17 major military conflicts that ended mysteriously in our favor. Command always attributed it to superior tactics or enemy incompetence. Your tactics were indeed superior," Jake acknowledged. "But they were aided by intelligence reports that seemed to come from your own reconnaissance networks. Human agents ensured that your forces always had the information they needed to minimize casualties on both sides." Admiral Voran's crystalline features reflected the conference room's lights as he processed this information. "The Battle of the Silver Nebula. Our fleet was outnumbered 4-1, but the enemy's command ship suffered a critical system failure at the exact moment we needed to retreat. You did that?" Helen nodded. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim infiltrated their fleet 3 months earlier. One precisely timed electromagnetic pulse delivered to their primary control matrix at exactly the right moment. No casualties, but their coordination collapsed long enough for your forces to withdraw. General Ben's rumbling voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. The fortress world of granite. The siege lasted 18 months, until the orbital defense platforms mysteriously lost power for 47 minutes. Long enough for us to establish a beachhead and negotiate. Surrender instead of total destruction. Major Danny Wright and his demolition team, Jake confirmed. They spent 6 months tunneling through the planet's crust to reach the central power core. The blackout was surgical, temporary, and designed to force negotiation rather than annihilation. The scope of humanity's secret involvement became clear as more examples emerged. Every major conflict, every potential disaster, every moment when the galaxy had faced existential threat, humans had been there, working quietly to preserve life and maintain peace. They had never taken credit, never demanded payment, and never revealed their involvement. Whisper-mind Lisa's telepathic voice echoed directly in everyone's consciousness. The hegemony incursions of 2391. 3 scouting fleets simply vanished without trace. We assumed they had found more interesting targets elsewhere. Captain Ryan Murphy's Deep Space Interdiction Force, Helen replied. They specialized in making hegemony scouts disappear without leaving evidence. Each operation was planned to look like equipment failure or navigational error. We needed to buy time to study their technology and develop proper countermeasures. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place as Jake explained humanity's true position in galactic affairs. Earth's greatest scientists, military strategists, and intelligence operatives have spent 2 centuries preparing for exactly this scenario. We knew that eventually the hegemony would return in force. We also knew that when they did, the galaxy's visible powers would be insufficient to stop them. Prince Kelther slowly rose from his chair, his golden eyes fixed on Jake Morrison, with an expression of dawning understanding. You were never a diplomat, were you? Yesterday, when I mocked your species, when I called you primitive and ignorant, you already knew all of this. Jake met the young prince's gaze steadily. I am Earth's Chief Intelligence Coordinator, responsible for monitoring galactic affairs and coordinating our protective operations. Yesterday, you mocked a species that has been quietly keeping your empire safe for generations. But more importantly, you mocked a species that was already mobilizing to save your life. The weight of that revelation settled over the conference room like a heavy blanket. The human ambassador they had dismissed as ineffectual was actually the coordinator of the most successful intelligence and protection operation in galactic history. The species they had scorned as primitive had been the invisible guardians preserving their civilization. Captain Grant checked her tactical displays and looked up with grim satisfaction. The hegemony fleet will be in attack range in 6 hours. Now that you understand who we really are, let me explain how we're going to save everyone in this system. The briefing that followed would redefine everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare, technology, and the quiet species from the small blue planet that had been protecting them all along. The hegemony fleet advanced with the inexorable patience of machines that had never known defeat. Their dark ships moved in perfect formation, weapons charged to levels that made nearby space itself ripple with distorted energy. Across the galaxy, automated monitoring stations detected the massive power buildup and began transmitting final status reports to civilizations that might not exist by morning. On Harmony Point, the assembled delegates watched through reinforced observation windows as Captain Helen Grant coordinated the defense. Her voice remained calm and professional as she issued orders to the human fleet, but everyone could see the tactical displays showing impossible odds. 48 hegemony vessels against 50 human ships seemed like a fair fight only to those who had never witnessed machine intelligence warfare. Prince Kelther stood beside Jake Morrison at the main observation deck. his earlier arrogance completely gone. The young royal's hands shook slightly as he watched the approaching doom. "Ambassador Morrison," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology that can never be adequate. Yesterday, I mocked your species as primitive, and today I learned that you have been protecting mine for centuries." Jake's expression remained peaceful as he watched the tactical displays. "Your Highness, youth often mistakes loudness for strength and silence for weakness. The galaxy is full of species that have made similar errors. What matters now is what we do with the truth." The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature star being born. Hegemony particle beams lanced out toward the human fleet with energy levels that should have vaporized anything they touched. But the TDS Defiance and her escorts simply absorbed the impacts, their hulls shimmering with defensive fields that dispersed the incoming energy harmlessly. Admiral Voran's crystalline features reflected the battle's glow as he stared at his instruments in disbelief. Impossible. Those energy readings show direct hits with planet-killer weapons. How are the human ships still intact? Captain Grant's voice came through the communication system with casual confidence. "Adaptive quantum shielding, Admiral. Our defensive systems analyze incoming energy patterns and restructure themselves to provide optimal protection. It's a variation of technology we developed by studying 17 different shield configurations from various species, then improving on all of them. The human response came not with the massive energy weapons that other species favored, but with something entirely different." The cruiser TDS Vigilant fired what appeared to be a simple projectile, a small, dark object that moved at barely half the speed of light. It struck the lead hegemony vessel and simply disappeared into the hull without any visible explosion. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the massive enemy ship began to drift, its weapons powering down and its formation breaking apart. Similar projectiles struck other hegemony vessels with the same result, not destruction, but complete shutdown. General Stonecrusher Ben's rumbling voice carried awe and confusion. "What manner of weapon simply turns off an enemy ship?" "Quantum disruption torpedoes," Helen explained as the human fleet continued its methodical advance. "They don't destroy the target. They temporarily disrupt the quantum coherence that allows complex machine intelligence to function. The ships are intact, but their controlling systems are experiencing what humans might call a very deep sleep." The battle, if it could be called that, continued with the systematic precision of a surgical operation. Human destroyers fired electromagnetic pulse cannons that shut down hegemony weapon systems without causing permanent damage. The cruiser TDS Retribution deployed something called a logic cascade virus that spread through enemy communication networks, causing their coordination to collapse into chaos within 30 minutes. The most feared fleet in galactic history had been reduced to a collection of drifting hulks. Not destroyed, not annihilated, but simply and efficiently neutralized. The human ships moved through the battlefield like shepherds collecting strays, using tractor beams to organize the disabled vessels into manageable groups. Whisper mind leases. Telepathic voice echoed with amazement throughout the observation deck. They did not kill them. The humans could have destroyed every enemy ship, but they chose to disable them instead. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Humanity learned long ago that destroying enemies only creates martyrs and revenge cycles. It's more effective to demonstrate that resistance is futile while offering the alternative of peaceful coexistence. Captain Grant's final transmission to the hegemony survivors was broadcast on all frequencies so that every species in the galaxy could hear humanity's message. "Attention hegemony fleet. Your vessels are disabled but intact, your crews unharmed but temporarily offline. You have two choices. You can accept transport back to your territory with the understanding that further aggression will meet the same response. Or you can remain here, and learn about alternatives to forced assimilation. The choice is yours, but you will not be permitted to threaten organic life again. The response came several hours later, after the machine intelligences had restored their basic functions and processed what had happened to them. The mechanical voice that had earlier promised annihilation now carried a note of something that might have been curiosity. Human entities, your capabilities exceed our projections by significant margins. We require analysis of your technological principles. Will you provide educational exchange instead of territorial conquest? Helen's reply was immediate. We will provide teachers and technical advisors. In exchange, you will help us monitor deep space for other existential threats to organic civilizations. Partnership, not domination. As the immediate crisis passed, the assembled delegates began to understand that they had witnessed more than just a military victory. They had seen humanity's true philosophy in action, power used not for conquest or glory, but for protection and the preservation of life. The species that had been mocked as primitive had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare. Prince Kelther approached Jake Morrison one final time before the human ambassador prepared to depart. A young royal's golden eyes held genuine humility as he spoke. Ambassador Morrison, I must ask, why didn't you reveal humanity's capabilities when I insulted your species yesterday? Why did you simply walk away? Jake's smile was gentle and tired. Your Highness, actions speak louder than words, and the right action at the right time is worth more than all the posturing in the galaxy. Yesterday's insults were words. Today's protection was proof. Which do you think will be remembered longer? The prince considered this wisdom before asking his final question. What does humanity want now? With your true capabilities revealed, you could demand anything from any of us. Jake picked up his simple travel bag and prepared to return to his quarters. We want exactly what we wanted yesterday, for the galaxy to be a little safer, a little more peaceful, and a little more willing to solve problems through cooperation instead of conflict. We'll continue doing what we've always done, protecting those who need protection and staying quiet about it. Though it might be nice if people stopped assuming that quiet competence means primitive ignorance. As Jake walked away, Prince Kelther watched from the observation deck until the human disappeared around a corner. The young royal finally understood that true strength didn't announce itself with grand speeches or impressive displays. It simply acted when needed and walked away when the job was done. Later that evening, Jake Morrison sat in his modest quarters aboard the human transport vessel, writing a brief message to his family on Earth. The letter was simple and direct. Like everything else about the man who had just redefined galactic politics with patient diplomacy and quiet competence. Mission accomplished, he wrote. The galaxy is a little safer today. Looking forward to coming home and helping Susan with her school science project. Love to everyone. Outside his window, the stars shone with the same gentle light they had always carried, but now they illuminated a galaxy where the loudest voice was no longer assumed to be the strongest, and where true power revealed itself not through domination, but through the quiet courage to do what was right when no one was watching.